Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And since today's subject is a horror series about a vampire, I've been reminded of a certain pop culture theory that floated around the web, I guess a decade ago or so, when Obama was the president. And in a nutshell, a bunch of journalists, bloggers, and media people came to a conclusion that there is a pattern with horror media and the way it relates to the current political situation in the United States. Essentially, for some reason, when you have a Democrat elected in the office, you have an upswing in vampire media. Vampire movies, vampire TV shows, vampire books, and so on. And when you have a Republican elected, you have an upswing in zombie fiction. Now, of course, correlation does not mean causation, and vice versa. There are numerous ways you could interpret that, tidbit. I don't think it's a fact. There are statistics, I'm going to show it on the screen. But it is interesting in a way, in a roundabout way, it relates to today's novel. In a kind of a macro level, of course, vampires are a metaphor for many things. For class inequality, because one of the oldest literary vampires, Dracula, was an aristocrat, a nobility, and that was kind of essential to his character. And he is not the only one, because usually vampires are metaphor for generational wealth and so on and so forth. But today's series that I want to review and recommend is called Nathaniel Cade, and it was written by Christopher Farnsworth. And it's a horror series with a premise that kind of borders on the ridiculous if it was not so committed and awesome to that same premise. Essentially, more than a century ago, then President Andrew Johnson made a blood pact, a blood oath, with a voodoo priestess and the bloody bullet that killed Abraham Lincoln to bind the titular character in order for him to become, quite literally, the president's vampire. That's also, coincidentally, the second book in the series. That's the title of the second book. Now, essentially, Cade is a vampire who is sworn to protect the president and the nation's interests at large for all the time he walks the earth. He must eliminate all of the supernatural and natural threats to the United States. And the secondary lead and our everyman window into this unnatural world is human called Zach, who is a political aide who turned into a reluctant liaison between vampire and the Oval Office, because during the decades, more than a century that Cade has operated as president's vampire, he always had a human liaison who would relay presidential orders to him and would be his kind of daylight operative. Now, most of the events in the series are set in the 21st century, and that's all in the middle of current conspiracy theories, political machinations, shadow cabals, Illuminatis, monsters, and so on and so forth. And to put it bluntly, let's examine what makes this series work, even though on paper it might sound generic. So, let's talk about genre trappings. If you've read the blurb or my description, you'd think it's just another urban fantasy, urban horror type of series. After all, you have all of the ingredients of the formula. You have a mysterious main character who is caught between two worlds, one natural one, the other unnatural one. You have a cast of characters that share his secret in some way. You have recurring villains. You have action movie scenes. You have mundane things turned into anything but. But as much as a whole cliche package this is, the series is not generic. If anything, what makes this work is the fact that it's not urban fantasy, it's political conspiracy thriller with horror underpinnings. And there's also more than a dash of hard-boiled, almost noir prose. There's definitely more like Elmore Leonard influences than there are Jim Butcher influences, for example. And that's the best part of the series that made me going. This is like, I don't know, horror Tom Clancy almost, but distilled. So the sort of onus is not on the larger aspects of evil, capital E evil, but it's more about unchecked human ambition that hides behind things like bureaucracy. And that's, I think, the theme of the books. That's the deepest evil. Because, after all, it takes a conscious effort for one human to harm another. At least you'd hope so. But with monsters, it's much simpler. Cade, a vampire, is a predator, and it's in his nature to be that. It's also in shark's nature to hunt prey. That's it. There's no pretense there, but there's very much a pretense with humans. So, and there's two arcs that both of the main characters go through that I also enjoy. The human character, Zach, is an everyman who wants to climb the political ladder and wants to have a political career. And he's a campaign worker who rose to the top, worked on presidential campaign, and after one misstep is thrust into this unnatural world. And he is someone who is stubborn, maybe even wide-eyed, but not naive, but progresses into, I'd say, a reliable, non-cynical agent of change. Weirdly enough, he starts as cynical and ends up being battle-hardened, but not that, even through numerous losses and pitfalls. And on the other hand, you have Cade, who is this constant state of flux. He was a man of fate in life, and now he's an undead monster, and he clings to that faith to keep himself in check. However, the best part about his character is the unceremonious way Farnsworth keeps reminding the reader that Cade is not human. He's a predator. That's who he is. That's in his nature. Vampires are a separate species. So they exist outside of our notions of morals and ethics and behavior. And as bound as he is to serve humans, he is still very much a damned monster who knows he is damned and always will be. So there's not much melodrama and tortured examinations of himself. There is kind of a metaphysical aspect to his character. He knows that he is destined to burn in hell for what he did when he got turned, but he also uses this as a fuel to keep on going. And all of this is to say that I very much recommend this series. I even composed an instrumental theme to it that, well, I got an inspiration while I think I was in the middle of book 2, and a melody started to form in my head. But yeah, I'll be adding it to this video, a snippet of it, and a full version of it will be on my musical channel with a link in the description. So that's about it for today. What's your favorite fictional vampire? I think Nathaniel Cade is quickly becoming one of my favorite ones. There are currently 3 books in the series and 2 novellas. I hope that author plans to continue the series one day. But thank you everyone for watching. Please do like and subscribe. And as always, a giant thanks to all of my Patreon supporters. You are the best. Have a good one. Bye-bye.